This video is for entertainment and educational purposes only. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's Big Paul here today with another anabolic Q&A. I've got some good ones on deck today. I never run out of questions. People love to ask me questions. I've probably answered some of these before, but that's part of the fun of this. So stuff we have on deck today. 4 weeks on, 4 weeks off, Humalog. Why I don't do deadlifts. A test plus EQ cycle. Dude added Tren in and started losing weight. He wants to know why. Suggestions for a second blast. Benefits of using insulin with or without anabolic steroids. What happened to the 70s bodybuilders look, and how much time do I suggest resting between sets? I get asked that one so fucking much. I'm going to address it today. We're going to dig into all this in just 1 minute. All right. So first question here is from F. Baroud. I think I said that correctly. He said, is adding 5 units of Humalog 4 weeks on and 4 weeks off pointless or beneficial during a high-dose anabolic cycle alongside 6 units of HGH? Okay. I get what you're trying to say here. So you just kind of want to tip your toe in the insulin pool. I don't, 5 units of Humalog. I'm assuming most people, the way they use insulin is pre-workout, which I think is stupid. So, that's my take on pre-workout insulin. I think that's the suboptimal way to use insulin. There's 24 hours in a day. You're eating out 16 out of those 24 hours of the day. Typically, the benefit of using insulin is nutrient absorption, nutrient transport. So if you're only using insulin pre-workout, you're only getting if you're using Humalog, it lasts for about 3 hours. You're getting 3 out of the 16 hours of the day. It's a benefit. So if I use it all day long versus you're using 3 units pre-workout, I'm probably getting 4 to 5 times much out of it than you are. And running it 4 weeks on and 4 weeks off is probably pointless, to be honest with you. Insulin's not one of those things where if you run it too much, that you get a negative feedback loop. Now you can become insulin resistant from an insulin dominant environment. That is an issue that you have to be aware of. But if you're maintaining your insulin sensitivity, if you're using berberine and doing low carb days and taking breaks from insulin, that shouldn't be an issue. If anything, using insulin when you're eating a shit ton of food, this is my belief, not everybody agrees with this belief, it takes pressure off of your beta cells in your pancreas and actually gives your pancreas a break. It's not one of those deals where, like with testosterone, where there's a negative feedback loop and you shut down your endogenous testosterone production. The opposite happens when you take exogenous insulin. You're actually taking pressure off your pancreas, and potentially, I've seen some anecdotal information on it, potentially giving your pancreas a chance to recover. And I think one of the big reasons that dudes become diabetic when, as bodybuilders, is they pound GH, which increases insulin resistance. They haven't, in the past, mitigated that increased insulin resistance from GH, so they didn't use things like metformin and berberine. They also took way too much HGH. I think once you get past 8, maybe 10 units, there's really no additional benefit. You start getting into the zone where you just get more side effects than positive effects. That's when you get that acromegalia look. I found that 6 to 8 units seems to be the ideal zone for HGH, and that doesn't fuck your insulin sensitivity up too bad, and you manage your your insulin sensitivity with you proactively with metformin and berberine, and you use insulin intelligently, and you can foster an environment for growth. I used insulin every day in my off season last year. I would use Lantus on every day, and Humalog on my high days only. And I would use Humalog at meals 1, 3, and 5. I have a full video series up about how I used insulin. I'm not saying my way is the right way, but it worked for me. You saw all the weight I put on in this past year, and I think insulin was a huge part of that change. Anyway, that's all I have on that one. All right, next question. I heard you say that you do not do squats or deadlifts. Why not, Paul? Well, one of them, I'm just old and my body can't take doing heavy compound movements anymore. And if I get hurt, I can't train. And if I can't train, I can't grow or progress. So I try to select my exercises intelligently. It's like playing tackle football when you're in your 20s. Yeah, you can get away playing tackle football in your 20s and get up and do it again the next day. But when you're almost 50 years old, you can't put your body through that train wreck. And that's essentially what doing deadlifts and squats are to me. Also, when I evaluate an exercise, and I have other videos up about this, but exercise choice for bodybuilding, and I'm probably going to do another video on it because it doesn't seem to sink into people's heads. I use some critical thought, another thing that people seem to be incapable of, but I use critical thought and I ask a couple questions about that exercise before I deploy it. One, how much fatigue is it going to cost me? You got to keep in mind that you have a certain amount of fatigue that you can spend on a workout, and before it accumulates and causes overtraining. So deadlifts, for example, have a high fatigue cost. You do a set of deadlifts, you're fucking toast, especially if you go to failure. I think I was up to deadlifting 6 plates at one point in my lifetime for reps. I could, when I was in my 20s and early 30s, I could do 6 plates for 7, 8 reps. But if I went up even and did 4 plates right now for probably 6, 8 reps, it wrecks the whole rest of my workout. I am blown out. So if I've used up all my gas on a set of deadlifts, how effective are everything else going to be in my back workout? How effective are my rows going to be? How effective are my pull downs going to be? How effective is anything else going to be? So I've blown myself out on one set of one exercise, and I can't go to optimal fatigue ranges on the rest of my exercises. So I think that hinders growth. Personally, I also, when I look at an exercise, I look at the risk versus reward ratio, just like I do with PEDs. Squats, deadlifts, and bench presses are a high risk exercise. There's high risk of injury. There's high risk of pulling or tearing something, especially when you're going heavy and training the way bodybuilders train. Powerlifters don't have, I don't think, as high of a risk because they're not going to failure like we do. And they only do a couple reps and they put it back in the rack and they have good form, and bodybuilders usually have shitty form. So I have to look at the risk versus reward. So is the risk of doing squats and injuring myself better than doing something where my back is isolated like a hack squat? I think I get more out of doing 4 sets of hack squats than I do with the squats, to be honestly. And then I also look at muscle stimulus. How much muscle stimulus am I getting out of the exercise? I don't feel like deadlifts do much to stimulate my back. Some people disagree with that. I know a lot of people think that deadlifts are the key to a big back, but I'll tell you this. There are a ton of people in my gym that can deadlift a shit ton of weight that don't have big backs. I see them every day. Not disparaging what they're doing. They're training for a different reason. If you're a power lifter, you're training to move weight from point A to point B and get really good at that. That's not my goal. Nobody is going to ask me how much I deadlift when I get on the stage at the bodybuilding show. The judges aren't having me filling out a questionnaire and deadlifting, asking me how much my deadlift, my squat, my bench is. They don't give a fuck. All that matters when I step on the stage is what I look like. So I also have to keep that in mind. Anyway, hopefully you find that helpful. That's my answer for why I don't do heavy compound exercises. All right, next one is from Bew Adam. He says, I've been doing 500 milligrams of test and 500 milligrams of equipoise, and my weight was going up. And around 8 weeks in, I added in Tren at 300 a week, and now my weight is going down. What the fuck is going on? Well, this is just me guessing. You probably kept your calories the same. And Tren is the only steroid that I personally, this is just anecdotal. I don't have any evidence of this, but I feel like Tren has some direct fat burning effects. I feel like it might even be a thermic uncoupler similar to DMP, because you get so fucking hot and sweaty on Tren. So clearly there's a process going on. I feel like your mitochondria are in overdrive when you're using Tren. And I definitely, when I take Tren, I harden up instantly. Within a couple of weeks, I just harden right up. And I start burning fat like mad when I'm on Tren. It seems to take the fat out. So my guess is probably what's happening is you've raised your metabolism with the Tren, and you've created a deficit even though you don't know it. And you're losing body fat and losing weight as a result. That would be my guess. I don't find Tren to be that great of a mass drug anyway. I don't know why people use it on mass cycles. It is very toxic. It always makes me feel sick. It makes me feel awful. I can't fucking sleep. I don't want to eat when I'm taking Tren. I get fucking Tren shits. I think anybody who's taken Tren before knows what I'm talking about. Tren, some people, not everybody gets it, but some people get diarrhea from Tren. I am one of them. So I save it for pre-contest only. So I think there are better choices for off-season. I would have just, rather than adding the Tren, I probably would have raised my test in EQ doses. That's my 2 cents. But that's my speculation on what is going on, what you have happening. That's probably what the deal is. All right, Darius Jones asked, this is one I get all the time. He said, suggestions for a second blast. My first one was 500 milligrams of test. Okay, so I have a video up about year one blasting and cruising. You can check it out if you want to look at what it looks like. But usually what I do with new trainers, I'll start them off on 250 milligrams of test. I suggest it. Ultimately, they do what they want to do. And then we work up to probably 500 milligrams of test on the second half of the cycle. And get the most out of that on a first blast and see what we can get out of it. On a second blast, what I would suggest is finding an anabolic that you're curious in. Usually I have people either use NPP, equipoise, or primobolan as their added anabolic. I like to start off with NPP, see if people can tolerate it. I found NPP to be nandrolone to be the best for putting on size. The reason I start off with NPP rather than DECA is in case you get in trouble. A lot of people don't respond well to nandrolone. They get anxiety, they get impotence. There's other, they have gyno related to the progestinic and prolactin effects of NPP, although I've seen very few people with high prolactin from NPP. But the advantage of taking NPP, it has something like a 48-hour half-life. You can get it out of your system in 10 days if you run into problems. Whereas DECA has something like a 10 to 12-day half-life. 12 days would be, it takes 5 half-lives for it to clear your system. You're stuck with it for 60 days. So if you get really bad anxiety, you have limp dick from taking nandrolone, and you are using the decanate ester, you are stuck with it for 2 months, my friend. So that's why I usually start off with NPP. So second cycle, I would do the test. I would add in, I'd probably try NPP first, see if you can tolerate it. If not, then maybe EQ is the second choice. So you can get your hands on real primobolan. That's always a good option too. All right, next question. It's from Anwin. Benefits of using insulin with or without anabolic steroids is how to do it right. Reason of not using anabolic steroids is to stay fertile, and I don't want to block HPTA, sorry. No, it's HTPA. They typed it wrong, so it's hypothalamus pituitary axis All right, so and you've got that backwards. Tripped me up there for a second. I I mean, I don't know how much you're going to get out of it. There's sort of to me, there's an access of benefit with insulin. I think you need, to me, to maximize, you need to I like using it with metformin, insulin, and HGH. That's the trifecta. You could use those three and not shut down your HTPA. Your testosterone production should still work. I don't know. I would say don't be a pussy and just use AASs. I'm just joking. Honestly, I don't know how much benefit you would get out of it. A little bit. If you're some sort of performance athlete that you're trying to load up before an event, you could certainly use insulin on a high carb day beforehand. I have natties that do use insulin. I've seen it where you run it on a high day, and you get a little bit of a benefit out of it. You can shove more nutrients into the cell, but it's not going to be anything dramatic. I don't think so. Yeah, you could certainly do it. I just don't think you're going to get much out of it. That's my 2 cents. Sub-Zero asks, he loves the 70s bodybuilders. He goes, what happened to the 70s bodybuilders look? It seems like dudes were more round and less cut than no one looks like that anymore. Well, a few things. Training in PED philosophy has evolved. Diets have evolved. Things were pretty primitive back then. The funny thing is the guys had access to the same PEDs that we do now. They just didn't know how to maximize them. There really haven't been many new PEDs in use since the 70s. I think the only thing I can think of that was not around, I mean, it was probably around then, but I don't remember exactly when it was invented, but that wasn't used until the 90s is Tren. So one big difference in the 70s is guys did not have aromatase inhibitors. There were no aromatase inhibitors. So you couldn't crush your estrogen. You still had that kind of bubbly, soft, watery look. Honestly, when I see a lot of those guys on stage back in the 70s, like even on the Olympia stage, they look like they were 6 weeks out to me. I don't necessarily like that look. I know some guys do. I like the hard chiseled look that we got in the 90s better, but I know that's not for everybody. So there were no aromatase inhibitors. Everybody back then liked to run dumbass D-ball. That was another thing. So they would run D-ball and DECA cycles. Although, from what I understand, people that I have talked to that were in the know, this is a myth I want to clear up right now, that Arnold ran D-ball his whole career. I was told that Arnold Schwarzenegger, when he got to Muscle Beach, that they got him off of D-ball, and he was running Primobolan and Anavar. And when I go back and look at his physique now, he went from having that puffy D-ball look, that baby boy face, to having a hard chiseled look. He was one of the harder athletes on stage. Not the most conditioned. Probably Frank Zane was the most conditioned, but you can certainly see that something changed. And also, guys, from what I understand back then too, they didn't calorie or macro count. I heard Frank Zane in an interview talking about diets back then, and they would just kind of wing the diets, and they would go with these kind of low carb keto style diets, which is wild to me. And they didn't do a lot of cardio either. They just basically did more volume in the gym, which kind of what I did this year. I just did more volume to burn up. I kind of like doing that, but it's just changes. People, modern bodybuilders train differently. Fat burners, I don't think they were using fat burners back then that I know of. Maybe not. Somebody can correct me on that, but I don't think they were using ephedra and caffeine and yohimbine and clenbuterol. I don't think any of that was being used back then, or T3. Maybe I think they did use thyroid back then. I remember hearing that they used Armour thyroid or something like that back then. I could be wrong about that, but things have changed a lot. I heard Rich Gaspari say, of course he claimed, I don't know how true this was, that he was really the first guy that started calorie counting strictly, and he was the first guy with shredded glutes, so he claims. I believe it was him. So my apologies to Rich if I'm incorrect about that. But so that was late 80s, mid 80s. So they weren't doing any of that back in the 70s. So guys got more detail with the diet. They use fat burners. They learned how to deploy the AASs correctly. There was no GH. That's another thing. No GH back then to get that hard look. So if you want to emulate that 70s look, just take D-ball and DECA. There you go, and hope you don't get gyno. And no AIs. So that's it. That's the answer to that one. Last question here. I get asked this one so fucking much. I don't know why people get so obsessed with this. They ask me, how much rest time do I take between sets? To me, people get focused on the 5% and they don't have the 95% buttoned up. If you don't have your diet buttoned up, if you don't have your PED protocols buttoned up, if your training's not buttoned up, how much rest time you take between sets is going to make shit all the difference in your results. It's like, let's focus on the low-hanging fruit first. Let's make sure that your diet is on track. Let's make sure you're using PEDs intelligently. Let's make sure your program is intelligent. I don't think rest times between sets is going to make much difference in how your physique turns out. I really don't. My approach to rest time, how much rest time do I take? Enough to be ready to do my next set. That's it, man. I don't overthink it. I just, so if it's a heavy compound movement, I might take a little longer. Give me enough time to check Instagram and Facebook. If it's an isolation exercise, then I'll just check Instagram. I'm kind of kidding. But you don't need a ton of rest time on smaller isolation movements, and then on big compound movements, you might need a couple minutes. I also I see guys doing these fast-paced workouts. I probably keep a fairly fast pace. Depends on if I'm listening to metal. If I'm listening to metal, my pace is definitely faster. But if I don't, so let's say you do another set before you're ready, and you get a couple reps less, I don't know how effective that is at stimulating growth. There's also, you could do like the powerlifters do, where they sit around for fucking 15 minutes between sets before they do another one. I don't think that's good for physique athletes. We do want to try to burn some calories and have a metabolic stimulus during our rest time. But I don't know. Don't overthink it. At the end of the day, it doesn't make that much of a difference. I don't think anybody has won the Olympia because I see people timing the rest times between their sets, and it's always the little dudes that are doing it. It's never the big guys. Because it seems to be that the little guys or the newbies get focused on the minutia when they haven't gotten the big important stuff figured out. So what is the perfect pre-workout? What is the perfect amino acid to take? All this shit that just doesn't really matter. Just get your diet buttoned up. Make sure you're training properly. You got a decent PED protocol, and that's really it. I mean, eat meat and rice 6 times a day. Train hard. Get some rest. Take anabolic steroids. That's how you get big. The rest time between sets is not going to make shit all a difference. All right, guys, that's all I got for you today. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate each and every one of you. Have a great day. For coaching or consultations, head over to www.anabolicbodybuilding.com to book your spot today. I can help you with optimizing hormones, fat loss, muscle gain, physique, athletic performance, nutrition, and health. For more information, shoot me an email at bigp3rd@gmail.com.